All of you, my name is Desiree De Leon Guerrero. I'm the Community Health Outreach Worker at the CGC Treatment and Recovery Clinic, and I'll be your MC for today. Welcome to the 9th CNMI Blue Ribbon Initiative Consortium meeting. Before we begin, on behalf of our team, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us here today. We are truly thankful for your continued efforts in supporting the Blue Ribbon Initiative Consortium. Without further ado, please help me welcome the Mayor of Rota, the Honorable Ephraim Actelig, to deliver his welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you, and welcome. So, to all of you, welcome to the island of Rota. On behalf of the people of Rota, the leadership, we're happy to welcome you all to the island of Rota. I want to give a special thanks to George Camacho, the former House of Rep. Thank you for coordinating the event, sir. Also, I'd like to recognize a familiar face that I remember, Dr. Katie Winters. Thank you and welcome. Like I said, Desiree, welcome. Paul Camacho, welcome. And all of you, I'm sorry, the local staff from CGC, thank you for your participation and your support. Thank you for being here this afternoon. So, the 9th annual Consortium meeting, having this really, we are battling the substance use disorder here in the island of Rota, and of course all of the CNMI. So I can say that we will not stop from there. We will continue to support this important event. So once again, I'd like to welcome all of you, and like I said, on behalf of the people of Rota, the leadership, welcome, and enjoy yourself here in the island of Rota. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Actelig. Now, I would like to call upon Mr. Peter Paul Camacho, our CGC Treatment and Recovery Clinic SAVG Project Coordinator, to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Desiree. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor Actelig, Dr. Katie Winners. Good afternoon, and co-workers, friends, and the people of Rota. On behalf of the Commonwealth Healthcare Corporation Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Esther L. Munya, Community Guidance Center Director Joseph Kevin Villagomez, the CNMI Blue Ribbon Initiative Consortium, thank you for helping us organize and hold this meeting here in this beautiful island of Rota. In a resource-constrained community, it is critical that public, private, and non-profit organizations work closely together to address the impact of drugs and alcohol in our Commonwealth. Whether it be establishing new norms, policies, regulations, procedures as a community. In the past 18 months, the consortium has met multiple times to plan the best approach to address gaps and needs on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. And we still need this community's leadership and support to implement prevention and intervention services on the island of Rota. Last year, we invited Dr. Winners to speak with different groups, providers, youth, service providers on Rota to provide a better understanding of this community's needs to address drugs and alcohol. The CNMI community as a whole recognized a key finding that substance use disorders a CNMI-wide problem. We, as members of the consortium, must work collectively to address the findings of the needs assessment. For today's event, we have Dr. Katie Winners, who will be leading the discussion to address the community's concerns with the findings, plans moving forward, and how to best ensure Rota is working effectively with this consortium to implement prevention, treatment, and recovery services in the island. We will also discuss the collective impact model and close off with an anti-stigma pledge. For tomorrow's consortium event, we encourage your frontliners or those who may come in contact with someone struggling with substance use disorders to attend an expert training provided by Dr. Jennifer Martita. Lunch will be sponsored by the Office of Mayor of Rota. Thank you, Mayor Atali, for sponsoring lunch. We hope you enjoy these next 2 days, and we want to ask for your continued support towards achieving a common objective of addressing this community crisis. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Winners, Principal from Insight for Action and Consultant for the CNMI Substance Abuse Block Grant. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Peter Paul. That was very nice.
Here you go, Peter. The room is yours.
Oh, thank you. Here you go. That sounds good. All right. Well, first things first, we have a little bit of a smaller group than I was expecting. And so what I would like to do first and foremost is a little bit of reorganizing, because I don't love talking out of a microphone. It makes me nervous. And so it will help me to not have to yell if all of the beautiful people at the welcome table and at the 2 tables in the back would please come closer. There's an empty-ish table there. I am requesting that you come near, because this is not going to be a sleepy time. This is going to be a participating time. And I want everybody to be involved and together, regardless of your role with an organization or the community. Thank you. This is my first pass at exercising my power of the podium. Oh, sure. Thank you. Peter Paul, you don't. And my friend here in the back table. Up. Closer. Come as close as you can. Great. We would love to have as many people from Rota here in the room as possible, because the things I'm going to be talking about aren't just things for people who work in mental health. This is information that matters to everyone who lives here. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for coming inside. If you don't have a name tag, please grab a name tag. If you don't have a lollipop to sugar your body and mind through this experience, please get a lollipop. There's lots of them in the bag at the back of the room. So let me go about this way. If you do not have a name tag, raise your hand. Everybody needs a name tag, because I am a visitor and I do not know all of you beautiful people. And so it will help me very much to have name tags. Thank you. I'm going to take this off so I can breathe, and if I step away from the podium without it, will somebody please let me know so I can put it back on? Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so everybody's got a name tag. Raise your hand if you do not have a lollipop and would like one. Or if you do not have enough lollipops. Additional lollipops. Please have an additional lollipop. These are my favorite candies. My very favorite candies. I packed them all the way from Portland to bring and share with you. There's different flavors. There's chocolate vanilla. There's butterscotch. There's cafe latte. So if you had one flavor and you want a different flavor, you can have a different flavor. Okay. Raise your hand if you do not have a yellow folder with papers inside of it that we'll be using for this time together. George, you need a folder. Peter Paul, you need a folder. Here. My team from CGC took me to breakfast. Where did we go to breakfast? Tiana's. And I had a big coffee. I'm excited. I'm caffeinated. And this is gonna be a lot of fun. Okay, so everybody has a folder. Raise your hands if you do not have a pen. Everybody's got all the things. Wonderful. So welcome. I have met some of you. I haven't met all of you. My name is Katie Winters. You can call me Katie. You can call me Doctor if you feel like it, but you don't have to. And my home place is Portland, Oregon. I got in yesterday morning after spending one night in Guam, and I'll be here in the Marianas for 2 weeks. So I'll be around. So if there's anything you want to talk to me about, any ideas you want to share, any feedback you have for me about the things I talk about today, I'll be here, and I really welcome your feedback because I'm a visitor here, right? I'm a visitor. I'm learning. So help me to learn. Help me to do better. So the group I work with in Portland is called Insight for Action. We basically work with all different kinds of nonprofits, human service providers, government entities, sometimes groups that are federal, sometimes groups from municipalities. But really our expertise is in gathering information that can be used to improve situations. That's kind of the high-level description. I do things like this. I facilitate trainings. I do things that look like research, gathering data, surveys, interviews, focus groups, pulling that information together to share back, to support communities, to guide their actions where they live and work and play. That's really the kind of work I do. I work in a variety of areas. Sometimes I work in the behavioral health context, talking about things like substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, but not always. I work sometimes in public education settings. Sometimes I work in, I was telling some folks yesterday, some of the work I'm doing now is focused on programs to train veterans to become farmers. So I say all that just to kind of locate myself professionally. I understand a fair amount about substance use disorder, but my expertise is in facilitating training and guiding learning. So if you have like very particular questions about addictions, for example, your clinical staff here are the better folks to ask those questions of. Okay, cool. So what I would like to do, because I like to talk, but I also like to listen, and I like to throw the responsibility back on the room. What I'd like each person to do, if you could go to the next slide, is turn to somebody near you and just share these things about yourself, your name, your role, why you're here today, your favorite thing to do for fun, and also something unusual about you. You think you know these people, but maybe you learned something new today. So please pick a partner, just take turns sharing back and forth, and then I'm going to pick on some of you to let me know the unusual thing about the person you spoke to. So be good listeners. 1, 2, 3, go.
I'm here.
So I'm going to just ask them.
I help coordinate all of it.
Who am I going to pick on? Who am I going to pick on? I'm coming for you. I'm coming.
From the Rota folks meeting.
Did you like the spelling? Yeah.
Vanessa,
I think you have some issues.
what did you learn about Jolene?
Oh, I know her name is Jolene and she works for CCB. She's an outreach worker.
CCB and outreach worker, okay?
And her favorite thing to do for fun, of course, is hang around with family and friends.
Of course.
Drinking.
Okay.
The unusual thing about her, no, I didn't get that from her.
You didn't get an unusual thing yet? Jolie, did you get an unusual thing about Vanessa?
She's
An open book, which is unusual because I hear about the Coconut Express. So that's good, good, good. And how about you, Mayor? What did you learn about Elvira that is unusual? Did she share an unusual fact about herself?
Actually, no. But, I know her role here is
What is her role here?
to listen in and give her best support.
Did he get it right?
Yes, because to be honest, we both shared that we didn't know, I wasn't really sure what I was coming to until I read it was,
Oh, it was a surprise. This
yes,
whole
my boss
experience.
said. So, I was thinking.
So you're terrified right now. That's what's happening. Are you afraid?
No, I'm not afraid because but I was thinking when I saw blue ribbon, I was thinking autism. Oh, maybe that's why my boss said, is this something? So I said, okay, yeah. But then,
And
that's our
now,
principal.
and now, what do you think you're here for?
I know it's dealing with substance,
Yes.
substance abuse and
Yes.
recovery and support to provide for situations like that.
You are a quick study, Elvira. Quick study. All right. Would anyone else in the room like to share something that they learned about their partner, something unusual, or their favorite thing to do for fun? Am I gonna have to come back here and pick on another person? You guys getting nervous? Darren.
Yes, ma'am.
Darren, what did you learn about who did you talk to? What's the band about charity?
Oh, that she likes to watch movies.
What is your favorite movie I saw?
Sci-fi.
That's my sweetheart's favorite. Yeah, good. Well, I hope everybody has arrived. The whole point, I know you all know each other already. The point of that is to help you arrive, to be here, to leave whatever it was that you had going on outside, maybe your wish to have the afternoon off, to let that go and get in here. So raise your hand if you're here. Raise your other hand if you're here. Give me 2 claps if you're here. Thank you. All right, so this is next slide, please. I'm gonna take a while to get used to it. I'm looking at notes and there's a separate version and blah, 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 but we'll get there. So this is gonna be our agenda for our time. I'm gonna share back to you some results from a needs assessment that I facilitated about a year ago. You're gonna have a chance to talk to each other about those results. Then we're gonna have a break for about 15 minutes. And then we're gonna do a little activity together. And that'll be the second piece. And then you will be free to go to the beach. Sound good?
Yes.
Okay. So what I would like everybody to do is, Desiree should have given you a blank piece of paper. So please pull out your blank piece of paper. And please pull out something to write with. Next slide, please.
What do you want to do?
I scared off the mayor, he ran.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. I'm not doing so good so far if the mayor left. So, on your piece of paper, please draw 3 squiggles that look like this kind of stuff. Maybe only 3, maybe more. Up to you. They don't have to be perfect. Just squiggle. Quick, squiggles. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Done. Squiggles are done?
Yes.
We got our squiggles?
Yes.
Okay. Next slide, please. Now I would like you to turn your squiggles into birds. So put a beak and an eye and 2 feet and a tail on your squiggles. Five, 4, 3, 2, 2.5, 2.25, 1. All right. Was anybody in the room not able to turn at least 1 squiggle into a bird? Who got to turn all their squiggles into birds? This side of the room is awake. This side of the room, I'm not sure. How's the squiggling going over here? Birds? You got 2? 2 out of 3? 2 out of 3? Okay. This is good. And it took you exactly 5 seconds, right? So why did we do this? We did this because basically our brains want to find patterns. It's how every human being is built. Our brains want to take nonsense and give it meaning. Our brains want to take seemingly not connected information and connect it, find the connections, create patterns, find meaning, okay? And so this is what I'm going to be sort of guiding us through today, is the results of pulling a bunch of different sources of information together and giving it meaning. This is what I do. And this is me bringing you into the way that I do this work, so that you can see that every single one of you here in this room is just as capable of finding patterns, pulling together meaning, creating structure and organization from information. We can all do this. So welcome to my crazy show. So next slide, please. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing, oh, that's a boo-boo. This is not preliminary. The first thing that I'm going to be doing is showing you the results of a needs assessment. Next slide, please. So what's a needs assessment and why do you do it? A needs assessment is actually a little bit of the wrong thing to call it. It's a needs assessment. It's also a strengths assessment. It's essentially gathering information to paint a picture of where you are now and what's available to get you to where you want to go. And so some of that is about what's going on right now that's not working. But some of it's also what's going on right now that is working, so that we can draw and leverage that to get where we want to go together. And so a good needs assessment, a robust needs assessment, typically has 3 pieces. Quantitative information, that means, those data that you're always gathering, working on, the numeric descriptions of what your situation may be. Also qualitative data, conversations, interviews, focus groups, talking to people, hearing their perspectives about what's going on, what's good, what's not so good. And then very important is the last piece, collaborative meaning making. Like I said, I have expertise in collecting information, processing information, turning that information into key takeaways. I don't live here. This is not my community. This is your community. So I can give you information, but it's really up to you to make meaning of that information, to put that information into conversation with what you know about where you live. the people that you live around, the community that you live in, what's working, what's not. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Next slide, please. So this is a description of what the needs assessment entailed. So I came out last spring, I was here for 2 weeks, spent my first week in quarantine, and then they let me out. And I had conversations actually with over 100 people. I spoke to 110 people total. And those 110 people were across all 3 islands. Some of the people that are in the room today I spoke with when I visited Rota last spring. Also went to Tinian and then Saipan. And so this is a description of all of the people that I talked to about substance use disorder and opioid use disorder in the CNMI. So some of these conversations were one-on-one, most of them were in groups. So I talked to educators, I talked to faith leaders, I talked to people who work in nonprofits, health and medical care, behavioral health. I talked to young people who have experienced substance use disorder. I talked to people in recovery. I talked to politicians, I talked to law enforcement, public safety, and commerce. So I spoke to people from a variety of different perspectives. Why do we do that? Because we want to paint a very rich, holistic picture of the situation, right? If I only talk to educators, or if I only talk to people who are responsible for substance use disorder treatment, that's only one frame, right? So I want to talk to people from all different perspectives. We also looked at a lot of existing documents and data. A lot of data is already collected on the situation here in the CNMI. Some survey data are collected on the whole population. So we looked at those data sources too. And then pulled all of that information together to paint that picture of both the strengths and the needs with regard to substance use disorder, opioid use disorder here in the CNMI. Welcome. You can move through this next slide. So part of the reason that we talk to a lot of people is so that we can paint a rich picture, but I think this is really more important, right? Substance use disorder is a complicated problem. It's a difficult problem. When a person is already experiencing substance use disorder and they're struggling in the community, they show up at the clinic, it takes a lot of effort to pull them back into health and well-being. And so addressing substance use disorder, it's not enough to just scoop people up after they're already experiencing those challenges. We gotta look way upstream. I'm gonna talk more about what that means to look upstream, focus on prevention. But also, it's because substance use disorder is a community-wide issue. It is not just about practitioners, providers, and clinicians to address this problem. It really takes everybody. And so that's why we wanted to talk to a lot of different people about the issue. Next slide, please. So the frame for the needs assessment, our sort of big idea that we use to conduct the needs assessment was the social determinants of health. So, can everybody see this? It's a little bit light. So, essentially, what we mean by the social determinants of health is that there are a variety of factors that contribute to a person's likelihood of experiencing substance use disorder. Thank you, Jeff. Is that got like this one light right here?
I think the middle one.
Yeah, right.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Oh, is that a little better?
It's also in the packet in case.
Oh, yes. You can read it in your packets. And so when we're talking about substance use or social determinants of health, really the idea is that a variety of factors contribute to this issue. So I'm going to just start here and kind of come around describing each of these pieces. And then the next couple slides I'll talk about what we found from the assessment. So when we're talking about health and healthcare, what we're talking about is access to healthcare. We're also talking about whether somebody has health insurance to pay for their health care to cover that cost. We're also talking about health literacy, somebody's knowledge about how to take care of themselves, the resources and supports that are available to them. Economic stability is about employment, poverty, food access and security, and also the stability of a person's housing. Those are the kinds of things we're talking about there. The social and community context, these are really the circumstances under which a person lives, works, and plays. It's their sort of social and community involvement, the connections they have with others, and also the extent to which a given person experiences discrimination or stigma in their community. That's that piece. Education is things like, did you complete high school? Did you go on to pursue education beyond high school? And also a person's language and literacy. Neighborhood and the built environment, we're talking about housing, the neighborhood, transportation access to healthy food again, the quality of your water, your access to green space, really that sort of world out there. And then there's genetics and family history, right? We know that some people can enjoy substances recreationally and not have a problem. We know that some people can't enjoy substances recreationally. And some of that's to do with the way that they're genetically composed inside themselves. But then there's also this piece called epigenetics. Essentially, this notion is about trauma being passed down through generations. That, for example, your mother's trauma, or your father's trauma, or your grandmother or grandfather's trauma, or maybe your great-grandmother or your great-grandfather's trauma, that becomes embodied and can actually be passed down through generations and affect the ways that your genetic composition manifests. So, let's say your family lineage experienced colonization, or war, or the Great Depression and the time of massive food insecurity. All of that stuff affects all of us, okay? So these next couple slides show basically the results of the needs assessment. So next slide, please. I'm gonna go through each one. If there's any moment during this presentation that you really pay attention, this would be a good one because the activity that we're going to do after the break is pretty much focused on this. So in terms of health and healthcare, based on the results of all of those interviews, all those focus groups, looking at the data that were available, we found out a number of things about the CNMI. In terms of health and healthcare, this is a professional shortage area. There essentially are not enough workers to serve in the needed healthcare, behavioral healthcare roles to meet the needs of the population. There just aren't enough workers to provide the services. A lot of folks are uninsured. This is in part due to some of the Medicaid constraints here in the CNMI. Also, health literacy varies really widely. And finally, many people don't have access to childcare. Some folks don't have access to transportation. So these things can limit whether a person can actually get to the kinds of health supports that could benefit them. Okay? In terms of economic stability, a lot of people are living in poverty. They don't make enough to pay for their basic needs. The most recent census data that was available when the needs assessment was done, so that was from 2015, what we found was that approximately 56% of the population, thank you, was living in poverty. There's also an unemployment rate that's about twice that of the US mainland. In terms of the social and community context, there's a lot of folks living in the CNMI who are non-citizens. There's also a culture of emotional suppression. I heard this again and again. When you're having trouble, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling upset, when you're having a hard time, there's this sort of expectation that you're not supposed to talk about your worries or problems with other people. There's also a stigma against help seeking. That even if services and supports are available to you, that saying yes and choosing to tap into those resources is something that people aren't necessarily feeling comfortable to do. And also this last piece, that substance use is socially accepted and prevalent. You know, early on, kids are exposed to people using substances, abusing substances, and so there's that modeling that's happening that they're taking in at a young age that, you know, binge drinking is cool, right? Any questions about any of those so far? Or comments or reflections? No? Okay. Next slide. So these are the other three pieces in that web of the social determinants of health. In terms of education, a lot of people don't pursue higher education beyond high school. There's also a belief that job opportunities aren't going to be available after graduation, so that motivation to pursue higher education isn't necessarily there. And then even for people who do want to pursue more education after high school, it can be cost prohibitive, right? Like there's just not enough money to pay for it, or the kind of job that you can get after you complete that education isn't going to be adequate for you to pay off those loans that you need to pursue higher education. So a lot of barriers in that regard. In terms of the neighborhood and built environment, you know, I'm sure you all are aware, like typhoons coming through here have been really destructive to the built environment. Again, this piece, not a lot of transportation access for some, little internet access for some, and also few recreation opportunities. There's the beautiful beach, of course, and hiking if you're up for it. But, you know, in talking to young people, it was like, we want a roller rink, we want a bowling alley, we want something, we want a place to do things so that we have an alternative. And there's just not a lot of that available. And finally, in terms of genetics and family history, you know, there have been multiple waves of colonization and westernization that have come through the CNMI over the past 100 years plus. And that's had an impact, right? Loss of indigenous language, loss of cultural practices. So these pieces also impact individual health and well-being. Next slide, please. So, the really important piece here, if you take away one thing from this conversation, is that, you know, any one of these things can affect a person's likelihood of experiencing substance use disorder, experiencing opioid use disorder. But the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. They all interact, they're all interconnected, and it's not a linear relationship, right? The more of these at play, the more that are contributing to a person, there's a synergy there that can make it exponentially worse, exponentially more likely that a person would experience substance use disorder if more than one of these is at play. And based on the data that we gathered from the needs assessment, each and every one of these things is impacting the people who live in the CNMI. So all of this is to say, this community, like many communities on the mainland, communities elsewhere, is already context where there's a very high likelihood that people are going to experience these challenges. So that was the first key finding from the needs assessment, is that the social determinants of health that a variety of social determinants of health are contributing to the likelihood that people will experience SUD. Next slide, please. The second key finding is that, SUD is a problem in the CNMI. It's a problem on all 3 islands. We talked to a lot of people about, this kind of trifecta of binge drinking coupled with betel nut and tobacco, that those 3 together. I see some laughs. It's like, yep, this is exactly it. Really common. That's just a normalized activity. There's some specific statistics about these various substances. I'm not going to go into them in too much detail. You have them in your packet. But essentially what I'll say is, there's evidence of people using betel nut tobacco together. There's a lot of evidence of a lot of alcohol drinking in the community, and there's a lot of evidence of a lot of marijuana use in the community. And this is from, children all the way up and through the lifespan into adulthood. Next slide, please. There's also an abundance of data demonstrating that methamphetamine has been a long-standing problem here in the CNMI. Who's that a surprise to? I'm not seeing any hands. People are aware this is a thing, right? And I updated this slide from the time that we did the needs assessment. Oh, it looks like this isn't updated. Oh, yes, it is. Sorry. So for the year 2021, there's the overdose data to action monitoring that's happening. This is primarily on the island of Saipan, but there's evidence that people are experiencing trouble with opioids as well. It's not as big of a problem as methamphetamine. It's not as common as the other substances, but it's definitely something that's surfacing here in the community. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of words on this slide. The key finding number 3, and this, is CNMI wide, right? So across all 3 islands, that there is a continuum of SUD/OUD services that are available to prevent and treat and support SUD/OUD recovery, and that at the time of the assessment, Rota and Tinian didn't have any on-site services for any of these pieces, right? So most of them are available on Saipan, but not here. And overall, the results of the needs assessment were basically people saying, when I get services, those services are good. I'm happy with the services I'm getting. My counselor is good. My counselor is helpful. But that the dosage, the amount of services that people are getting is just not adequate, right? And so people are slipping back into their substance use challenges, their opioid use challenges, because even when they get through treatment, there's just not enough. They haven't gotten enough to really interrupt that problem for themselves. Next slide, please. So that brings us to key finding number 4. That the systems that are addressing SUD/OUD are under-resourced, they're reactive, and that they're contributing to workforce burnout. The people that are in those positions have too much to do, and so they're not persisting in their job roles. There were some particular gaps in the system that surfaced in the needs assessment: inadequate prevention, wait lists to get into treatment, and inadequate access to sober living. So people who went through treatment and then need a community to help keep them sober, that's not available for them, and so they're kind of back into their community where they're likely to kind of be triggered to get back into that using behavior. And then there's a whole variety of things that would be wonderful to have, and they don't exist, right? There are no youth-specific services, there are no inpatient youth services, There's no medicated assisted treatment for people who are experiencing opioid use disorder. There are a lot of gaps, right? And so again, the scope of the problem is much larger than what's available to address it. Next slide, please. So these are some additional pieces that came out of the community needs assessment. First is that, there's a really strong stigma against SUD, OUD. And also people have pretty significant privacy concerns. Folks who want services and supports don't feel like they can access those services and supports because they feel like it's really likely that word's gonna get out that they're in treatment. So people are not accessing the services that are available to them for that. Another key finding, the grant that funded the needs assessment is focused on opioid use disorder. And what we found is that it's not a crisis here. So this is a really time-sensitive, critical opportunity to get ahead of it, so it doesn't end up looking like the methamphetamine problem in the CNMI. Just a couple more slides, and then I'm going to put you into an activity where you can be talking to each other about this. Next slide, please. So, key finding number 7 is a bright spot in all of this. There are under-tapped resources, there are untapped resources available to address the problem. It's not just about providing clinical services, right? There are other things that can support a person, to fortify a person, so that they're less likely to experience SUD. Leaning more heavily into indigenous history, practices, and wisdom can really support people to keep them safe, healthy, and well. There's also a willingness among the faith community to play a bigger role in supporting people in this way. And finally, you all know this, right? Like, this community has been through a lot. Whether it is that colonization, whether it is those natural disasters, like, some very difficult things have happened here. And that has created a very strong social fabric. Y'all take care of each other. You care about each other. When somebody needs assistance, you reach out. And so, all of this to say there are opportunities here that are potentially untapped or undertapped. And at the same time, there just are not enough resources to go around, right? And there are multiple competing problems that are happening concurrently. And so tough choices need to be made about where to put the money that's available to address the needs that exist here. And so, this is one of the comments down at the bottom that came out of those focus groups. Somebody said, if we have a great plan but no resources to implement it, what then? So there's an acknowledgement that resources are necessary to address the challenges that exist. Next slide, please. I mentioned some of this already, but this is just a list of the bright spots that came out of the assessment. Culture, resilience, social fabric. People are becoming aware that substance use disorder is a chronic illness, that it's not a personal failure, that it's something that needs to be treated as a chronic illness and not something to feel ashamed about. Again, this prevention opportunity here with regard to opioids. And again and again and again and again and again and again and again, every time I talk to a new group or a new person, people said, I want to do something about this. It's time to do something about this. So people are really motivated and ready to do action around this, to move beyond talking and planning and into the doing phase. So to me, that's really exciting. So, that is the end of my presentation of information. For the rest of this piece of the agenda, what I'd like for you to do is basically get together with a partner and have conversations about the information that I just shared. So next slide, please. So what I'd like you to do is, once again, pick a partner. Pick somebody different than the person you talked to this morning or earlier today about the unusual facts about yourself. Pick a new person. This might be a good time to stand up and move around the room, find a new buddy. And when you sit together, what I'd like for you to do is talk to each other about these 3 questions. What was confirmed that you already knew? I probably told you some things that came as no surprise. Also, what surprised you, if anything? I'd like for you to talk to each other about what stands out in your heart, given the information, and also what stands out in your brain. And then also finally what you're still curious about. So, 1, 2, 3, go. So let's all come back together. And so what I'd like to do is just, I want everyone in the room to benefit from the conversations that you've been having in pairs. So what I'm going to do is basically just kind of work through each pair and ask each pair to share out to the room. Maybe just the highlights of your conversation that you had. So if you want to share back all 3, or just pick 1 or 2, it's totally up to you. But just to let the room know kind of what your thoughts were in response to the findings of the needs assessment in relation to the situation here in Rota. And I know a lot of the CGC staffers here live on Saipan, so you're welcome to speak to whichever place or space you want to. So do I have a pair that are willing to volunteer to go first? Thank you, George.
You can go.
Thank you.
All right. So we based our responses on all her answers.
Great.
We worked it out that way.
Yeah.
This response and I just speak.
Good.
Anyways, something that was confirmed that she already knew. She's a counselor at the school, so she's fully aware of the uninsured, the lack of resources. That's nothing new.
No surprises.
That's everyday stuff. Was anything surprises? She's a counselor. Nothing surprises her. She's seen it all. Seen it, heard it, been through it all. For the school. Something that stands out in her heart is the kids, obviously. The exposure to all of this substance use at home, especially if it's at home, the kids are right there. So it's hard to intervene or keep it away when it's right there at home. Something in her brain, it's her desire to protect these kids at home. She knows that the way will be to get into their homes and try to get to these kids that,
Generational trauma.
Try to break that with the kids, that it doesn't have to be this way. There is hope, there is light.
Great.
And something she's curious about is the Blue Ribbon Initiative, Consortium, and I answered that for her.
Okay. Thank you. So, Elvira, did I say that right?
Yes.
I'm going to ask you to pick on whichever group you think should go next.
I take this group over here. I can see they were eager to share.
Yeah, I saw you guys having a good conversation, so I'm excited to hear what you're saying.
Okay, so number 1, what was confirmed that we all reviewed? Drug use, we hear about it. Drug use.
Sorry, there's an air conditioner behind me, so I want to be sure I'm hearing you. You were already aware about drug use here?
Yeah, this is nothing, we hear about it all the time.
I'm sorry, because I have a follow-up question. Like, when you say we hear about it all the time, like, what do you hear?
Marijuana, a lot of things with marijuana, ice.
Okay.
Number two, what stands out in our heart, the stigma and asking for help. There's no shame to it really. I know a lot of people who feel that way. And number three, what are we still curious about? Like what services? We're still curious about what other services can they offer and how can we get it out there.
Like what services can be added here on Rota? Great. And does your partner have anything else you want to share? No? Okay, thank you very much. And who are you going to pick on to go next? I think you two are on deck.
For us?
Yeah.
For us? Okay. Okay, so for us, number two, we're gonna talk about number two, what stands out in our heart and in our dreams. So
Can everybody hear what she's saying? And yeah?
Not really.
Not really? You're going to have to turn around and speak up, my dear.
okay, so for heart, what we were talking about was that it affects everyone, and we as a community in the CNMI should really fight against the stigma when someone asks for help, and it also ties into the generational trauma because that's very true, especially for millennials. And then for the brain, like all I could think about was education because I'm 30 years old and I knew none of this only until I got my job at Community Guidance Center. So I think what we could do as a whole in the CNMI is start like being proactive and as early as like high school, like try and have these things within that group range so that in case they already are affected with SUD or they have someone in their family that is affected, they can help them or help themselves because I really think it's really at the young age, especially in high schools, because in high schools you're still learning about yourself, you're trying to figure out where do you belong, what clique do you jive with. So I think education is very important, especially in the high school level, because high school you graduate, you go out, you go to the military, you go to college, you know, you can be exposed to anything out there. So the difference between us and in the mainland is how we're a tight-knit community. So before we send all our young kids out, at least they know that they have a community that if they come home, they can get help. So that's
Thank you, Danica. And I'll since you had the courage to stand up and share, I'm going to leave it to your partner to pick the next group to share. Who? Sorry, who?
Jessica.
Jessica. So what did you both talk about? And please do stand up and use your big presenting voice so this recording can capture your feedback.
What we confirmed that we already knew was that substance abuse and opioid use is a long-standing CNMI-wide problem that we've been trying to address for the longest time. It's more sad than surprising that after so many years, we're still at the same place, asking one another the same questions. And if anything that stands out in our hearts and in our minds as providers, as community members, as advocates, as volunteers is, what is it going to take to happen in our communities, in our own homes, before that question of how do we divide the pie becomes and chooses substance abuse recovery, treatment, and prevention to be important, not to say that our leaders don't see it as an important thing, but when does it become so very important that it becomes a top priority as opposed to something on the back burner or like a second afterthought to another problem? So what is it going to take? Does it take somebody in their own families? Does it take for an entire group of kids to all OD at one time? What is it going to take? So that's what we're still curious about. Yes, culturally, we're very resilient and we're very close-knit, but despite those factors, we still have this problem. So there's something that we need to do. And thank you very much for coming to the CNMI, having things like this, so that we continue this conversation. But we need to move past conversations. Because we've been doing this action planning, this training, and unfortunately, we still see the same faces. There is still here. I'm still here. I know Jesse from forever, you know. We're grateful that we have these new faces. But I left CGC how many years ago, and we're still here. 7 years ago.
We're still. I feel like maybe I kind of like paid you to say all those things, in part because it was a really good lead into what we're going to do after the break. And, you know, I think it takes a lot of courage to say, you know what, I've been here and I've been standing on this hill and it's not looking any different. That's a courageous thing to say, right? That's a courageous act to say, we're not enough. Where are the others? Why are we doing this alone? And why aren't things changing? So I really appreciate you standing up and saying that. Thank you. So who has not shared out yet? I think these buddies over here. Yeah, okay. Is this our last group? So I'm going to ask one of you to get up and share what you came up with.
What was confirmed that you already knew before at a young age start chewing tobacco? Did you see mine?
Not surprised, seeing lots of young kids chewing tobacco, okay.
What stands out in your heart? You're worried about them, how we can help them, assist them, how can we change their behavior to stop them from using. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're gonna take a break. There's some refreshments. Desiree, do you want to explain about B? It's something called Prune the Future. Jesse, are you in charge of the slide? Yeah. Would you go to the next slide? Oh, and one more after that. So, the Blue Ribbon Consortium is a group of 80 plus people, and this is on the island of Saipan I'm talking about. There's like about 80 people that are part of the Blue Ribbon Consortium. And they're people that represent all of the perspectives that are represented in the needs assessment, right? So it's people that are employed to do prevention, treatment, and recovery services. But it's also law enforcement, first responders, politicians, educators, faith people, people in recovery, adults and youth. And the big picture idea is that this Blue Ribbon Consortium is pulling people together from all of those perspectives so that all can be involved in addressing substance use disorder, opioid use disorder in the CNMI. And that's what all these meetings have been, right? Bringing people on board, providing education around this issue, providing information about, all the training topics that have been happening and are going to continue to happen. But ultimately, the purpose and point of this is to get into a phase of engaging in action around these issues, right? Learning and talking, and then moving into a stage of doing the work to dig in, to address these challenges that exist here. And this group, you all in this room, are essentially an island-specific consortium. That's the idea, right? There's the broader Blue Ribbon Consortium that includes all 3 islands, and there's going to be work at that level, but there's also work that needs to happen here on Rota. Work that's specific to the issues that you're experiencing here on Rota. Work that's grounded in your knowledge of both the strengths and the challenges here in this particular community. And so, really, this is about acknowledging for every person in this room that you have power to address this issue here where you live, and you also have responsibility to address this issue here where you live. And it's not just about the people in this room, right? It's that every single person who lives here on Rota, whether they're rich or poor, whether they were born here or moved here, whatever they look like, whoever they're related to, however much money they may have or not have, that addressing this is about everybody. It's an all-hands-on-deck moment. And the reason it's an all-hands-on-deck moment is because of these social determinants of health, right? There's all these different factors that contribute to SUD. It's about the built environment. It's about what people are experiencing in their home place. It's about people's access to education. It's about all of the pieces that are in that web, the economy. And so what we're going to do with this next activity is basically break you all up and give you a place to talk in pairs, small groups, maybe 2 or 3, about each of those social determinants of health that I presented on. So if you look around the room on these poster sheets that are around the room, the activity is called Prune the Future. And essentially, it's a metaphor to show you how the future can be shaped one leaf at a time. So, for my helpers, actually, this is when we're going to need those Post-it notes. So we'll need like 1 or 2 stacks for each of the trees. There's going to be a CGC person that's with each of one of these trees. So I think I identified 6 of you that agreed to help and support with the instructions that I gave you earlier. And so each one of these trees is labeled with one of the social determinants of health. So this tree is focused on education, provided you with some data that came out of the needs assessment, and also, how these social determinants look here on Rota, right? So these trees are set up to give you some space both to talk about what's going on right now, what the current state of affairs is in relation to each one of these social determinants of health. So, for example, with the neighborhood and built environment, maybe one piece that would be related to the current state
would be people with access to safe, affordable housing. That might be a piece related to the current state. You could describe what that looks like. So that's the space that's under that first dashed line on the lower part of the tree. And then the space between that lower dashed line and the upper dashed line, that's your space where you are given a place to envision the future. What you would want that social determinant of health to look like. If you could wave your magic wand and have the neighborhood and built environment here on the island of Rota to look exactly the way that you would want it to look, so that it was the perfect setup for people to not end up in that trap of substance use disorder, to not end up in that trap of opioid use disorder, what would the neighborhood and built environment look like? So with each of these trees, there's gonna be a CGC staff person who has a little stack of Post-it notes. So yeah, if you wanna, who are my CGC volunteers? Could you raise your hands and remind me who you are? Each of you needs a stack of Post-it notes. So, does everybody, do each of you have a Post-it note stack?
I need one.
Just the volunteers, yeah. So, could each of you CGC volunteers please go stand with one of the trees? So Jeff is with tree number 1. Jessica is at tree number 2. I need somebody at tree number 3 or 5, whatever. I need somebody at this tree. Thank you, Danica. Okay, and so who's gonna be with number 5? So the rest of you folks, I'm gonna count you off, and that number will tell you which tree you're gonna go to. And so during your first pass, you're gonna just have a conversation. What does this social determinant of health look like right now on Rota? And you're gonna use these Post-it notes. They're the leaves, right? They're like the leaves on the tree. And so you're gonna write one piece of information on a Post-it note and stick it on the tree in that space describing the current state. So in that example, right, neighborhood and built environment, maybe you would say, oh, there's a lot of folks that are living in substandard housing right now. And that would be one leaf on that tree. And so you're gonna brainstorm all of the pieces of the neighborhood and built environment that you see right now, and you're gonna add those leaves to the tree. And then once you feel like you've completed that phase and you've done a really nice holistic description of the neighborhood and built environment, for example, on this tree, it'll look different over here when you're talking about education or health and healthcare or the community context, right? Each tree is going to be different. But once you feel like you've gotten to a place where you've really described the current situation, there's nothing else that you can add to that tree, you're going to move into the future state. And you're going to go through the same process of brainstorming, okay, what do we want to look like? What are the things that we need related to this particular social determinant of health so that our community would look like a place where people are least likely to experience SUV. Does that make sense? And what questions do people have?
So if we're group 5, then we just work on that tree.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll be at the same tree the whole time. Good question, thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna count you up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the number's a little funny. Go find your tree. Is basically go around from tree to tree and have each group kind of share out to the bigger group about your tree.
We go around.
We will, yes, we're gonna go from 1 through 6. So there's a couple things I'd like to have you be sharing about. I'd like to hear, of course, about the content, right? I want to hear a holistic description of your tree. You know, what you noticed as you created the current state, what you noticed when you described the future state you want to see. Maybe if there are particular branches that have a lot of emphasis, right? Like particular sort of themes that surfaced as you were creating your trees. So I want to hear content, and I want to hear content because it's important that everybody kind of be connected around these various social determinants of health, right? I also, if you're up for it, would love to hear process, right? How was the process of working on this together? What did it feel like to collaborate on this activity? What did it feel like inside of you? So, you know, feel free to talk across both. And you know, it doesn't have to be just one person, like multiple people from the tree can share out. Don't lean too hard on your CGC staff person facilitator to share for you. So does that make sense? Yeah? Cool?
Yeah.
So let's go with tree yes, what?
Just got informed that they're going to switch over from city power to, I mean, from generator back over to city power.
So there's no curve?
Yeah, so you can talk about the current state and then the future state. You can sort of talk across both. It's your chance to like tell this room what you came up with, right? And so it's totally up to you how you do it. That's very cool. I'm sorry, what's your Tristana's going to share out her tree, so let's all give her our attention, please. She's going to share out.
Okay, so current we have retention, graduation, percentage increasing and increasing. We also have increase in resources, limited choices, only one college, and too many natural disasters affecting the systems that we use.
Okay. And so that's the current state that you're talking about?
And then we also have, currently we have programs directly related to behavioral health. And then we have training opportunities for them currently now. And then in the future, it also ties into increasing capacity within those programs directly.
Okay, building those out.
And then we have here kind of like a twofold, education is affordable. But then on the other hand, we have, because of the increase in cost of living, students now that are coming out of high school are, you know, they're going to incur debt if they go into, you know, go to seek higher education. So that's 1 year. So on the flip side for the future is to continue to seek more funding availability through grants and scholarships and stuff like that. And we actually have one that is locally within the CNMI. There's a master's program for the behavioral health. And I think they kind of like subsidize
Your tuition cost?
Yeah, tuition costs.
Okay.
Why work through that program?
So there are some education programs for people to persist past high school, it sounds like.
Yeah.
But you'd like to see more opportunity and more funding for people to persist in education. Did I get it right? Yeah? Okay. And any comments about the process, what it was like to work on this together? Was it a grind? Did it hurt you? Did it make your brain activate? How was the process?
Just
A lot of research.
Oh, did you confirm with your Google phone?
Yeah.
Good, good. No, that's fair, right? It's like you have to tap into all the resources you have. Very good. Okay, thank you. So group 2, what is our group called? Healthcare?
Yeah.
Okay, so take it away.
Before Vanessa takes it away, so this is basically general, okay, not specifically one medical aspect, because
Yeah.
our health and healthcare facility here is an issue, so.
So for our
You
current,
said your health and healthcare facility is an issue?
Well, it's not, it's, needs to be upgraded.
Okay.
We have social, like.
Got it. Okay,
so
thank
for
you.
our current state, we need more medical supplies as well as equipment. Infrastructure, such as dialysis facilities, staff and equipment as well. We need more services, medical referral, and of course our light issues. Shortage of manpower. We need permanent doctors. Not just doctors, I guess. I mean, all types of doctors like eye doctor, etc. Medical insurance, and of course stipend. So this is our current state.
What would we have to state?
Got it, very good. And the future state?
For the future state, we have improvement of infrastructure, updated equipment, one stop, telehealth, payment plans, permanent doctors, more staff, and daycare facilities.
What was the last one?
Daycare facilities.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like daycare so that people can get their medical needs met and not be taking care of their kids at the same time, maybe like that. Great, very good. And the process?
It's great. I mean, good experience to, jumpstart our brain or see, our current state and the future.
Okay. Possible future. Thank you. Number 3, what is your social determinant of health?
Genetics and family.
Genetics and family history. Okay, great.
So our current state, we have the generational trauma, suicidal thoughts, gambling addiction, depression, anxiety, and DYS more support for the future to prevent child abuse and neglect.
So that's part of the current state is more support. So you've got a pretty good Department of Child Services. It's pretty strong. Great.
For the future state, professional therapy, more clinical providers, therapies, psychiatrists, more support groups like AA, SMA, behavioral health clinic, rehabilitation center, recreational centers, arcade, boats, stigmatized FTP, not feel for admission to get help.
Beautiful. And any reflections about, connections between the current and the future state, or, comments about just like what that process was like to work on this together? Eye-opening. Yeah. Come up with some surprises. Great, thank you. Okay, so I jumped, so that's group 4.
Are we going on order?
Yeah, number 4. So, what's your social determinant of health?
Social and community conflicts.
Great.
So the current state is declining population, lack of business community, high cost of commodities. We need more jobs. We have limited hours to of businesses that are open. No clubs for entertainment. We're laughing that. No McDonald's or bingo establishment. That way we need for the voter. Although we do have children's park, but it only probably benefits the young generation. And for the beach facility, I think that's the only thing that we have, which is nothing, and the beach for family to socialize. And for our future state, we need the enhancement of culture facility on island that will keep our youth busy. And we also need the direct flight out of Rota to Guam. We need better health facility. We need a restaurant that opens 24 hours. We need fast food restaurant. We need department store. We don't have any at all here. So this is our future. Can't wait for it. I need to get out of here.
Thank you. Group number 5. And what is your social determinant of health?
Neighborhoods and built environments.
Neighborhood and built environment, okay.
So the neighborhood and built environment. So first off, my name is Demon.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Please don't stand. By the way, yeah. Anyway, so we're going to, this group, we were able to identify a lot of hotspots. So what we did notice is that a lot of one of the villages here still has dirt roads, that can cause a lot of health problems, asthma, things like that, right? So we're still using an old septic system, where septic waste is being kept in a underground, pretty much room, and then extracted and removed. And that might cause healthcare problems when it leaches into our
Drinking water?
Yeah. The water table lowers. Dilapidated houses, a lot of people personally still live in dilapidated houses. That's our reality. It's still an ongoing problem. We don't have any sidewalks, or we do have, but they're limited. So that's why not a lot of people are doing a lot of walking, because Nikes are expensive. I don't want to get them very good. And again, paved roads, like I said, is one of the dirt roads. I think it's actually so sidewalks, we're too dependent on fossil fuels, so that means we're just using a lot more cars, it's causing a lot more air pollution. We're getting a breath of that. Lack of lighting, and so basically when we say lack of lighting into our community parks, it just means that we're limiting the number of hours that our children have access to. Pretty much when nightfall comes around, they're unable to use the basketball court simply because there's no lighting. Right, so limited and proper medical resources. So then again, although we do have the U.S. military that we utilize when there's a serious medical situation, the response time is usually a lot longer than we would like, right? And especially when we're dealing with a medical emergency, we want to have that response time quick, quick and easy. No recreational centers, yeah. So like I said, it's all about the games. You can drink as many protein shakes as you want, but without a gym, you're not going to get much development, right? So you need a gym, and then yeah, that's it. That's our current environment. I'll let my partner take over.
So for our future state, hopefully we have a proper sidewalks, pathways for bikes and joggers, affordable housing, improved internet system, paved roads, renewable energy, 24-hour recreational centers, reliable shipping, and a better sewage treatment.
Okay. So I like how there's this very kind of clear line between what's going on now and the different kind of future you'd like to see. Any comments about the process? What it was like to do this together?
So the 10 minutes we have to put this thing together. I mean, we could have a more in-depth conversation. You know, these activities are more open, and especially with the people that actually make the decisions, like the legislature. Try inviting them maybe into the conversation.
Yes.
They can see what we see.
Yes, yes.
That's just my process or
Thank
my
you.
experience.
Yeah, I agree.
As far as the process, in my part, it's very easy to reach the very eager and knowledgeable. So all I did was
You got to just be a helper.
The creator or safety,
I'm glad they made it easy on you. Thank you, Group 5. Okay, we've got one more group, right, group number 6.
Okay, so our group is the economic stability, and it just have to be this topic because I'm not really a fan of this topic. But anyway, so the current state for Rota is economic is unstable, dependent on federal, it's not sustainable, very minimal resources, prices of commodities is extremely high. Transportation, importation, or exportation, importation, as well as transportation, in and out is unreliable.
So it affects the economic stability.
Yes. So how I was thinking about this when I was writing this is just, I guess, all the connections regarding economy, money. Future state, I wish, I'm hoping it becomes sustainable. Former residents returning, opportunities for families who choose to remain, recreation activities for families, increase of businesses, establishments, cheaper commodities, more employment available, opportunities, government to invest in the people and local businesses.
You did a really great job, especially considering that you were kind of all over. So I'm glad that you had a nice CPC person to work with you. And it sounds like you don't think of yourself as someone who's wise in the ways of economics. And I personally think you did a hell of a job.
I think, you know, when you see and you absorb the challenges on your island and your home, you don't have a choice but to figure out what's going on, what's happening. So, yeah. Even if it's not my topic, but
You can see it.
it's our home. Yes.
And any reflection about just the process?
Going back, you know, to when I had Mr. George, many of the things that I think about are our kids. And when I look at this, I'm saddened because there's nothing for our kids. There's nothing to. You have to ask me about my thoughts.
You're doing great. And you also had to say you want to pass and you want to stop.
Yeah, there's nothing for our kids. There's nothing to make them value at this point. Our home, other than family being here. That's just my thoughts because they look around, there's no opportunities. And the reality is not every family is fortunate to go abroad and to make a living abroad. A lot of us, not just only we choose to stay and we want to make a better home, but no choice but to stay. So what do we have for them?
And it sounds like the economics is a really
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Thank you so much. But, you know, I heard today, and I've heard before, like, talk is nice, but when's the rubber hit the road and we're gonna do something about these things, right? The action piece. So, I've just got some information around, like, next steps, right? Like, this is an important exercise, and I was actually really super pleased to see, like, you know your community and you know what's needed. And
now it's like, how do you get down into the nitty gritty of moving from where you're at to where you want to go? So in terms of next steps in relation to what came out of these conversations, you know, a lot of the people who are here today are going to be at another meeting next week in Saipan. And during that meeting in Saipan, what we're going to be doing is getting into a process, an action planning process. So the groups next week will be, and there are 5 groups. They're organized around prevention, treatment, recovery, planning and sustainability, and workforce development. But all of that is going to be grounded in the social determinants of health, as we've been talking about today. And so the folks that were here in this room today, participating in these activities, listening, hearing the things that have surfaced from these conversations, they're going to be there. And so those folks are going to be pulling that information into that action planning process. And they're going to come back here, right? So it's a process that can be replicated here on Rota. So I really encourage all of you that are here in this room right now to hold those that are going to Saipan accountable, to carry this information with them there and to bring it back here. And for you all to build from the energy today, right? It's like there's a huge amount of caring in this room. And you all know what's needed. And so in terms of the future use, you know, in addition to building action plans to address the social determinants of health, I'm curious maybe if you all would just take like 1 minute and close your eyes and get into your body and think about, you know, what you personally can do to carry this information forward, and also how you might share this information with others in your community so that you can pull more people into this work, right? Because it's about everybody. So maybe just 1 minute. Let all of that land. Thanks, everybody. This was a really great group. I had fun. I appreciate you participating. I appreciate you showing up. Please stand up. Raise your right hand. Pat yourself on the shoulder. You did a good job. And I will pass it to my friend Desiree, who's got one more piece.
Thank you, Dr. Katie. That was really moving. I'm sure everyone in here got a lot out of the presentation and then our group discussion. That was very interesting, and I'm glad to say I learned a lot from you guys here on Rota. So thank you again, Dr. Katie. So once again, my name is Desiree De Leon Guerrero. I'm here to talk to you about the collective impact model. So what's the collective impact model? The collective impact model believes that no single entity can tackle a social issue on its own.
So when I think of a social issue, I don't just picture one person. I picture an entire society, an entire community. So what better way to tackle those issues than as a collaboration, us, a consortium. The CNMI actually adopted this model back in the 1990s, where different parts of the community, like students, mental health experts, and faith-based organization representatives, came together to shine light on one of the most pressing issues in the CNMI, which was substance use. I was going to show you a 20-minute video today, but I know it's almost 4:30 and you guys are supposed to be an admin lead for today, so I'm just going to go ahead and share that video. The link, I'll share it with George, who will then disperse to everyone in the room. But basically what the video was what we're doing today. It's what the Blue Ribbon Initiative Consortium is today. Except this time around, we want this to continue for as long as it has to, in order to make an even greater impact. Because again, that was back then and it didn't seem to carry on, but now that we're all here today, especially on Rota, we hope that it does carry on for the future and for as long as it has to. With the collective impact model, there are 5 conditions that we must follow in order for it to work. Number 1 is a common agenda. And for us, that would be to tackle substance use in the CNMI, in Saipan, in Tinian, and of course in Rota. Number 2, backbone support. For us right now, our backbone support would be CHCC Community Guidance Center, but we hope that in the future we're able to transition off to the community. We hope that we wouldn't have to be the ones to come up here and set everything up. We hope that everyone comes together as a community and they hold these meetings. They come through with the training so that everyone is aware about substance use disorder. Number 3 would be shared measurement. For us, that would be the data that we collect and share among one another in terms of prevention, treatment, and recovery. Number 4 would be mutually reinforcing activities. Again, for us, that would be like working to reduce stigma, which is something we talked about a lot today, and increasing motivation to seek services. And I'm sure after today's group discussion, there's so much more. There's so many other activities we can think of to spread awareness. Number 5 would be continuous communication. For now, a lot of us, through the consortium, we communicate through email, but I do know back on Saipan with the little committees that we have, they communicate via WhatsApp, they meet on Zoom, they meet in person, and we hope that soon enough that will be happening on Rota. Later on, we will be working on a website where everyone can log in. If you want to spread the word to the rest of the community, we can lead them to that website. So we reach an even broader audience. So now that we know what the collective impact model sounds like, I hope it increases your motivation to come together, not just as a consortium, but as an entire community fighting for one cause. And to start us off in our efforts, we'll be talking about stigma. So, for some of you in here, this might be your first time hearing this, and for those who have been with the consortium for a while now, you might have already heard this, but I encourage you to continue on and just listen in, and then in the end, we'll be doing the anti-stigma pledge, which can be found in your yellow folders. So stigma, what is it? Stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace, infamy, a stain on one's reputation. Substance use disorders carry a high burden of stigma as we learn today. Individuals who suffer with the disorder often stray away from seeking treatment, or let me rephrase that, they're discouraged to seek treatment in fear that they'll be stigmatized or that they'll be judged. And after all, we are a small, tight-knit community, most especially here in Rota, so what could be going through their minds? I think it's that they're scared that the word will get around. They don't want people to know what's going on, right? But why? They're making the effort to get help, right? So they're trying to be better, yet they continue to be judged. They continue to be frowned upon. And it's no different from a person who suffers from diabetes seeking treatment. That's a disorder. It's no different from someone who suffers from hypertension, looking for a way to manage their high blood, as many of us might call it. And as we learned earlier today from Dr. Katie, stigma and privacy concerns were 2 of the biggest barriers for individuals to seek help for this disorder. So if a person doesn't seek treatment earlier in the stages of addiction, they're more than likely at risk for other harmful outcomes like committing new crimes or developing other diseases aside from substance use disorder. And therefore, I believe that if stigma is addressed, the community may see better treatment outcomes and individuals may have a better chance to remain sober. So again, why do we put them to shame? Why do we stigmatize them? We should find ways to encourage them and so they can get the help that they need. So let's start by putting our focus on the words that we use. So I want you to think about the words being used in a conversation about a person who suffers from a substance use disorder. The words that pop into my head are druggie, meth head, junkie, dirty addict. All of these are so defaming, condemning, and stigmatizing. And keep in mind, these words are used even when they're in recovery, even when they're seeking help. People think about them like this, but they're trying to get help. So why? Why do we discourage them like that? So let's stray away from that. Let's get rid of those words and use the phrase person with a substance use disorder, or better yet, a person in recovery. Because it helps not to make the disorder their sole identity. What we don't realize is just how much of an impact those words have on them. We don't know how it makes them feel when we use those words, right? So our team at the Treatment and Recovery Clinic came together to create a video that I'm going to share with you all today. It's a short video. And the video is used to help all of us conceptualize the impact that stigma has on substance use disorder. Before I play the video, I just want to warn everyone, let you guys know that you're going to hear vulgar language because the words being used are coming from the people in recovery themselves. Sound real quick and then I'll play it. When you go to play on your end, does it go?
You're a menace to society.
Keep using it until you die.
Once a druggie, always a druggie. Useless. Why should I trust you, druggie? Nothing but a crazy meth head, low-life person.
Don't let the druggie in. Things are gonna go missing.
You're the only fuck-up I have. Who cares if they get hurt? They're just stupid drug addicts. Everything that happens to you is your fault because you're nothing but trash and useless.
You're not family to us anymore.
You're just a waste of life. You are just a failure.
So now I hope everyone in here is able to feel, to see, to recognize the effect of stigmatization on substance that each and everyone in the room stand to take the anti-stigma pledge in an effort to battle substance use disorders, stigma within the community. So you can follow along with the pledges that you have in your folders, and then we have it up here as well. So just repeat after me. I pledge to avoid using stigmatizing words like druggie, junkie, meth face, and addict in everyday conversations. Speak out against mental illness, including addiction, stigma and discrimination whenever I see it. Continue learning about addiction issues so that I can replace myths and fear with truth and understanding. Promote cultural and social support services for individuals and families struggling with the negative impact of addiction. All right, thank you guys for taking the anti-stigma pledge. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. You guys can take your seats now. So with that, I want to thank all of you for allowing me to speak to you about stigma and the collaborative impact today. And most importantly, I want to thank you personally for joining us in our efforts to overcome substance use in the community. Now I would like to call upon Mr. George Camacho so he can deliver his closing remarks.
Thank you, Desiree. I promise to keep it short. I know we're all anxious to get out of here. But before we close up, I'd like to invite everybody back here again tomorrow. Tomorrow we have a very important training on SBIRT, S-B-I-R-T. Screening, brief intervention, and referral to treatment. That's very valuable for all of you guys who work with the community. You keep in touch with the community. They see you every day in your work, in your daily work. I know everybody has a WhatsApp work group. Send it out, come tomorrow. It's a holding training. Don't worry about lieutenant for lunch because the mayor is hosting us tomorrow. So what time do we start?
Tomorrow we should be starting registration at 8 o'clock.
So expect to see everybody here back again tomorrow, plus your co-workers and everybody else. Invite the community out. I don't normally like to list names because I might forget somebody. But I'd be remiss if I don't thank the Honorable Mayor, Mayor Atalik. Please remind the Mayor that the mango carabao at my house is almost ready. Whenever it comes by to San Pan, he's always looking for mango. So we're almost there. Yeah, he left, so I cannot tell him. The Honorable Municipal Council members, Chairman Jonathan Islama, and the other members. I'd like to thank the CGC staff here. Without them, we wouldn't have today possible. It was hard coordinating all of this. The CGC staff here, CGC staff on site panel. But most especially, thank you to each and every one of you for taking this time to be here with us today. Did I miss anyone? Oh yes, I did miss anyone. Somebody. DCCA RD, Dwayne Maritita, Miss Valerie Apatay, Miss Avery Hopcook. Thank you everybody. Please, and again, extended invitations for tomorrow. I always love coming down to Rota. Whenever I come down to Rota, I get reminded of the 3 I's. I got this word. The 3 I's. Inagwaza, loving each other. Inazuda, helpfulness. Inakuprendi, understanding. But there's one more I that you guys got to mention all the time. Inekano. With that said, thank you everybody. Let's all enjoy the next canoe.